Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shmei Rabbah. Exalted and hallowed be his great name. Today is my father, Olav Shalom's 20th yahrzeit, 20th anniversary of passing, Rabbi Moshe ben Dover Levertov. I'm also reciting Kadish for my mother, Mrs. Bracha Levertov, who passed away 10 and a half months ago. And while I was reciting Kadish yesterday at our service, it hit me. This is the only time I'm going to be reciting Kadish for both my mother and my father together. Never happened and never will happen again. Their yahrzeits are different dates, and therefore once a year I'll recite for him, once per year I'll recite for her. This is the only time that it overlaps because I'm reciting Kadish for 11 months for my mother, and it happens to be my father's yahrzeit. That's very powerful to recite Kadish for both parents at once. A Kadish could only be recited in a quorum, only when there's a community. One should not recite Kadish at home. It's not meant to be a private prayer. There are many other private prayers, but not Kadish. What's the power of Kadish? Why is it that we recite Kadish after loved ones? There's no mention of passing. There's no mention of our beloved. We speak about exalted and hallowing God's name in this world. Well, the whole Kadish is to request and proclaim that we want to recognize God's name in the world, God's energy in our world as soon as possible. We ask for peace. Oseh shalom b'miramav, hu yaseh shalom. God who makes peace in heaven should make peace on earth as well. How does that relate to those who passed on? Why does that help their soul? We know it helps their soul. We understand it helps their soul. We have stories in the Talmud and the sages about how that reciting Kaddish helped those who passed on. Well, when we recite Kaddish and we recognize the Creator, we recognize our spirituality, we recognize our mission, it means that those who were before us, our ancestors, our beloved, left a legacy. They imprinted they educated us and inspired us to keep that legacy alive. And that's why it helps their credit. That's why it's to their credit. When I recite Kaddish for my mother, I'm helping her soul in her journey for the first 11 months of her passing. When I recite Kaddish on my father's day of my father's passing, I'm helping his soul in his journey, because every year the soul continues to strive higher and go higher and higher in spirituality and reap the rewards of their efforts throughout the year, throughout their life. Well, it's very powerful. And when we have a community coming together, it's very therapeutic as well. It's amazing support to have everybody come together, especially to recognize my father, mother, to help me in honoring them and reciting the Kaddish. It's been a journey. It's not so easy to recite, to gather together people twice, 3 times a day, every day. Sometimes we manage to get together the group, sometimes we don't. And I want to thank a special mention to our dedicated secretary, Ann Bell, who's been making calls and making sure that we have those minions. My father and mother were very pious people. They were very dedicated parents, dedicated to family, dedicated to the grandchildren, and dedicated to community. My father came out of Russia. He narrowly escaped Russia after the war, World War II, 1946. Unfortunately, his father never made it out. His father, who I'm named after, Dover, Rebberal Levertov, was a dedicated chassid, a dedicated man who kept Judaism alive in Moscow. He was the ritual circumciser, the mohel, as well as a shochet. It was absolutely illegal to do that, and the KGB was on his case. They were checking on him. They would have people inform on him. They had records on his every move, and eventually they arrested him, and they killed him in the gulags in 1949 after his arrest in 1947. And my father grew up 16 years with his father, and he wrote a book about it, and he always shared stories about living in those difficult times and the meaning of being dedicated to Yiddishkeit, dedicated to continuing the spirituality, the holiness, not giving up so fast. When he came to the United States, he continued that with his activism in the community, with his being a mashpia, a mentor to many people, and then together with his friends, founding this special organization for Russian Jewry, to help Russian Jewry. They would send packages and people, clandestine tourists, rabbis posing as tourists to help teach to people. And eventually, what we see today in the former Soviet Union, the great renaissance of Judaism and the leaders of the Chabad movement in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, is all thanks to my father's efforts in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s. My mother was a dedicated activist as well, dedicated mother. She ran the women's mikveh in Crown Heights, always going to lessons, to listen to teachings, to lessons. She always taught us stories, always told us stories. She was very creative. She became an artist in the end of her life and left us with a lot of writings and a lot of art. And I am very humbled that the community came together these past 10 months and will continue till the next couple of weeks, and that we are able to recite the Kadish and honor the legacy. May their memory be a blessing. And again, thank you so much for joining me and helping me honor my special parents. Yehi Zichram Baruch.